Amen. So let's look at what we covered last week. Covered a lot. We talked about missionary is not, okay, we go back in our outline, we mentioned who sent Paul, what does it mean to be out of a local church. We said a missionary has a pastor he's sent from his local church. Well, that would mean that a missionary is not a pastor, doesn't hold the office of pastor. He may do the work of a pastor while he's on the field, helping that church while it's trying to get his own national pastor. And then we talked about a couple examples, Timothy and Titus. We also talked about, as far as the office of evangelist, we talked about Timothy and Philip. We said last, which was letter C, that the office of evangelist in the Bible includes our modern day missionary. And then letter D is missionary should have the same qualifications as a pastor. Now we'll get to that in just a moment. Just to reiterate one of the other things that was asked last week, it was said, could he have had the office of apostle and evangelist? Could he have been both? Well, let's think. Peter was an apostle, correct? And if you read one of his epistles, you'll also see that he was an elder. He was a pastor. So here we see a man who was an apostle and a pastor at the same time. So I think it's quite in keeping that Paul could have been an apostle and an evangelist. You see what Paul and Timothy did. They did the same work. Obviously, Paul had some apostolic authority that Timothy didn't have. But even Paul said that that Timothy did the same work that Paul did. All right, so I think it's just best to understand and remember that missions, if you go back and look at all of those offices listed in Ephesians 4, 11 and 12, you'll see that their end goal is all the same, that they are supposed to perfect the saints for the work of the ministry. Okay, we believe in a local church, and that's the reason why we're discussing this in detail, is because we have to understand the structure of the local church and how it works. Okay, and so a missionary, when he is sent out from a local church, and he's accountable to his local church. Obviously, yes, he's going to establish a local church, and he's going to help those local churches that he's there with. But his end game is to go and do that somewhere else and continue to represent his sending church on the field. So that brings us to 1 Timothy chapter number 3. 1 Timothy chapter number 3. Now, I already made the statement, the missionary should have the same qualifications as a pastor. Why? Lawrence? Or maybe you don't agree. That's okay. Lawrence?
He's doing the same work as a pastor would do, so he should have the same qualifications to be able to do those things.
That would make sense. If he's fulfilling the role of a pastor, it makes sense that he would have some of the same qualifications, right? Is that what you're going to say, David? Sounds good. But is there anything that actually states that is there any inference in the Scripture specifically that a man should, who is an evangelist, should have the same qualifications? Well, we're in 1 Timothy chapter 3. We begin there in verse number 1. It says, "This is a true saying, if a man desire the office of a bishop, he desireth a good work." Then it gives the qualifications. A bishop then must be, and here's a whole bunch of things he must be. There's some things in there that he must not be also. Now you say, well, that doesn't prove anything. That just proves that those people, so Paul's writing this to Timothy. Where's Timothy? In Ephesus. What's he doing? He's charging some, as we read earlier, that they teach no other doctrine in chapter 1 of 1 Timothy. He's there trying to help the church. He's there trying to help make sure that the pastors are what they ought to be. Then it says So Paul's giving him qualifications for those who are going to be, those who are pastors. And then drop down there to verse number 15, and I think you will see where I'm going with this. It says, "But if I tarry long, that thou mightest know how thou oughtest to behave thyself in the house of God, which is the church of the living God, the pillar and ground of the truth." Now notice, he said that thou, who's the thou? Timothy. These things, he says that thou mightest know how thou oughtest to behave thyself in the house of God, which is the church of the living God. Go back to verse 14. "These things write I unto thee." Okay, I'm writing unto you these things. What things? He just got done talking about the qualifications of a pastor. He says, these things, these qualifications. Then he also ties it together, saying, it's not just for the pastor. He says, "But if I tarry long, that thou mayest know how to ought behave thyself in the house of God." He was trying to reiterate that it is not just for the pastors, but for him who was doing the work of an evangelist. So I believe that the qualifications for the pastor and the qualifications of a missionary are exactly the same. And for two reasons. One reason, because they're often fulfilling the role of pastor, not always, but often fulfilling the role of pastor in an early church plant. But then they're also this verse here indicates that Timothy was supposed to have the same qualifications. Now, the reason I throw this comment in there is because you may run across some people, like I have, who would say, well, I remember talking to a man and knowing a man who said, he said, I've been divorced and I love God and all that, so because I've been divorced, I can't be a pastor, but I can be an evangelist. And that was and he said, I can be an evangelist because those qualifications are for the pastor. They're not for an evangelist. So what are you going to tell him? Because in that sense, if he's a modern-day American evangelist, he's not really going, and he's never probably going to fulfill the role of and do the work of a pastor while the church is trying to get a pastor. What are you going to tell him? I think it's good to have something a little bit more solid than just, well, he should. I think this verse here ties it together. And so there's this idea that sometimes someone who's not qualified to be a pastor, that's okay. He can go be a missionary. So what are we trying to say? That missionaries don't have to be as godly or as qualified or as prepared or ready as a pastor? That doesn't even make any sense. It seems to me a little bit foolish, and it seems to me ignorant of the Bible. They're going to start a church. If he's not qualified to run a church and help a church get started, then why is he starting it and trying to run it and telling them how to run it? How is he going to ordain elders and help pastors get installed when he's not even qualified to do it himself? Okay, so to me, it's so if a missionary does the work of a pastor while he's waiting to fulfill, while they're waiting for God to call a pastor, I don't think he should be any less qualified than the man that he's supposed to train to take the job. All right, so we're done with that. That was what I was trying to finish up last week. We didn't have time to finish it. So now we're going to get to point number 3 in our outline under this section of notes, is what about mission boards? What about mission boards? Okay, so we're talking about the ministry relegated. He's authorized, he's assigned. So we talked about who sent Paul. That was the local church and the Holy Spirit. What does it mean to be sent out of a local church? A missionary has a pastor. He's not his own independent pastor with no authority over him. He is sent from a church, represents a church. We also said multiple times, we'll say it again, if God calls him to stop being a missionary and become the pastor of that church, amen. Go for it. That's all right. God can do that. Now, what about mission boards? Because this is under this section of being authorized. And a lot of times, mission boards overstep their bounds. So now, let me just say this. Whether you agree with mission boards or not, you've got to understand mission boards have been around for a long time. Many missionary heroes such as William Carey, Adam Judson, David Livingston, Hudson Taylor, all served under mission boards. Ooh. So they were all a bunch of rebels? They were all bad? Okay. It's doubtful that, because they've been around for so long, it's doubtful that they're going to go away, that they're all going to dissolve and disappear in the next couple of decades. Okay? So we need to make some decisions about them. In your lifetime of ministry, there will probably still be mission boards around. So let's make some decisions about them and try to develop a reasonable philosophy about mission boards. There are good men with mission boards serving on the field. There are good men without mission boards serving on the field. All right. So the key is that any missionary maintain the biblical mandate of having a strong relationship with his local church. Now, the subject of mission boards, I don't know, how it is from the churches that you come from, but the subject of mission boards can be very sensitive in some areas, and it's become a very polarized subject in some independent Baptist circles. So whether, men, you're going out to be a pastor and leading a church, or you're going out to be a missionary, and you ladies who are going to help the men, it's good to have an understanding of what's out there and what you'll be facing. So let me give you a few points. Actually, we're going to hopefully cover a lot of ground because I have a lot to say about this. Let's look at letter A. There are no mission boards in the Bible. There are no mission boards in the Bible. No biblical character in the Bible ever used a mission board. Okay? So you can say, well, that makes them unbiblical. Well, it might make them extra biblical, meaning it's something that wasn't in the Bible. But then again, airplanes are extra biblical. They're not unbiblical. I use an airplane to get to the mission field. It's extra biblical. It wasn't in there. No missionary ever used an airplane to get to the mission field in the Bible. But does it make it unbiblical? Does it make it wrong to do? Not in that case, no. I think Paul, Timothy, Titus, Philip, none of them had boards, and there's no command in Scripture to use a mission board. Now, I'm saying this, you say, of course that makes sense. You shouldn't even have to say that. But I'm telling you this, and you need to get this down because there is a reason I'm saying this. Okay? There is no command in Scripture to use a mission board. Now, let me give you the next point. Letter B. It is not wrong to go to the mission field without a mission board. Okay? It is not wrong to go to the mission field without a mission board. That's how I went. I went to the mission field without a mission board. And I returned without a mission board. Now, while trying to book meetings during deputation, one of the things you do is you call up a lot of pastors. And you talk to a lot of pastors about trying to, hey, can I come and present my ministry? And hopefully, And many pastors refused to have me because I did not have a mission board. Now, what do you think of that? Is that a good stand to take? That was their mission policy. You don't have a mission board, so we can't take you. Can they make those choices? Of course they can make those choices. They're local churches. They can do what they want. Okay? But I have a problem with that. Let's consider a couple of things. I'll give you some quotes from some pastors. These are things that I was told while I was making phone calls on deputation about this very particular subject. This is my favorite of all of them. I'm against it, talking about going out from my local church and not having a mission board. He said, I'm against it because it seems that churches are starting to take the place of mission boards. Those were words spoken from a pastor. And I thought, my brain hurt. I was like, ouch, what did you just say? I'm saying to myself, wait, which one came first? Local churches. Churches are now taking the place of mission boards? That's bad? Whoa, I'm thinking, I don't even know if he really even understood what he just said. But I fully understood what he said. And I fully understood that he was dead wrong. Now, another quote from a pastor was, what are you going to do if the leadership of your church changes? Well, guess what happened? Not while I was on the field, but the leadership of our church did change. Okay? And what happened to all our missionaries? All the ones sent out of our church. They all got dropped, right? They all got kicked to the side of the road. No, they're still missionaries. So what if? Okay? What if the leadership of your church changes? You trust God. What does that even have to do with anything? I'm just trying to explain to you how polarized this thing is. And some people are just so, it's almost angry that you dare go to the mission field without a mission board. You say, that's crazy. Okay, I agree. Paul and Barnabas weren't too concerned about what was going to happen to their home church. They just knew, I'm called to God, I'm going out for my church, and we're going to go do it. Well, I don't know if we're going because, the pastor might change and, we might not be allowed to stay on the field, or I don't know what the implication was with that whole question. Here's another one. I can't take you on for support. Okay, I can't take you on for support because I wasn't from a mission board. But you can come for a meeting, and when you have special needs, we might be able to take up an offering for you. I was wondering where the consistency was. You can give me money for a special need. You can give me money in a love offering if I preach, but you can't support me and can't give me money on a routine basis because I don't have a mission board. Why? Because that's the church policy, and you've got to go by the policy. Do you see how policies can sometimes be absolutely ridiculous and prevent you from doing something that is good and right? Here's a guy that he doesn't have a board, and he might be an outstanding missionary, and you want to help him, but my policy says I can't, so I can't do it. So you know what you do? You might go take a church and has a policy like that. You know what you do? Change the policy. Amen. You're the pastor. It's okay. Just change the policy. All right. Anyway, here's another quote. I've had some local church missionaries that were not checked on by their sending church. Okay. Well, does that mean that all local church missionaries are not not checked on by their local churches? What about board missionaries that aren't checked out and checked on by the boards? Well, that doesn't matter. You can't ask that question, because I know board missionaries who were doing some bad things. And it's like the mission board didn't want to know. Well, no, then they distance themselves. Well, we just service them. Oh, wait, you can't have it both ways, guys. Here's another one. I don't know all of the local churches out there and where the pastor stands on issues. A board is supposed to check this out, and I know where the board stands. In other words, he was saying, I can't take missionaries on who are not sent from a board, because the board, I can trust the board. I know the board. They check all that out. And I don't know where everyone's. But, I was actually from a pretty decent-sized church. And a lot of people actually knew where Fairhaven Baptist Church stood on a lot of issues. And so, what kind of argument was that anyway? So, sounds good, but many boards don't check out their sending church, and many boards don't check out what the pastor believes of the sending church, and they really don't care. Some of them, they just want to make sure that they're servicing more missionaries. And so you can put too much trust in the board instead of putting trust in the local church that sent them out. Now, I do agree that if you're going to support a missionary, you ought to know where, you ought to have some confidence that his sending church is a good church. I agree with that. But not that the board is supposed to, supersede the local church. So why punish a guy for following the New Testament pattern of going out from a local church? Doesn't seem right, does it? I know of a pastor. I know of a man who was going out into the ministry. He was using a mission board, and he had married a young lady from a particular church, and that particular church loved that young lady and all that, but couldn't have them in and couldn't support them as missionaries because he was using a mission board to service him. And here, it's one of their own kids going off to, into the ministry, and no, our policy says we can't do it. Okay. But a pastor with a policy that accepts only missionaries affiliated with a mission board, I think he only hurts himself by neglecting the good men who are just trying to be loyal to their local church. Okay? Independent Baptists, they need to learn a certain word. I've used it in my class, Ministry Essentials. It applies to about anything. Balance. Balance. Okay? What happens is a lot of independent Baptist churches and pastors, they react and make policies that in the end are either impractical or unbiblical. And I think some pastors have been hurt by missionaries without a board. Sure, but it's no excuse for ignoring the principle. Don't punish a guy for doing what he thinks the Bible teaches. Okay? He's following a New Testament pattern. And you're going to say, no, I won't support you because you're following the Bible. I don't understand that. I really don't. One thing is clear. The Bible never teaches that a missionary must have a mission board. Now you understand why I said that in the beginning. Okay? And those who make it a requirement, I don't think they have any biblical foundation for their decision. Now, if I'm on the phone calling to book meetings as a missionary and that's his policy, okay. That's fine. It's not my job to correct him, nor is it my job to argue with him, nor is it my job to get mad and angry at him. That's his policy. Fine. You can't have us in, you can't support us, no problem. Thanks a lot, have a good day. And you get on and make another phone call. Yeah, a bunch more phone calls. All right, let's give you letter C. Missionaries are sent from the local church, not a mission board. These are just, I'm just giving you some basic statements. Okay? Missionaries are sent from the local church, not a mission board. So there is this false notion that a missionary chooses to either go out from a local church or out from a mission board. That's not true. Any missionary, if he really is a missionary, is going out from his local church. Now, he may choose, in many cases, a lot of them choose to have a mission board service them and help them out, but it's not either or. It's not either you're sent from a local church or you're going out from a mission board. So that fellow who said, I'm against it because, it seems like the churches are taking the place of mission boards. It's almost like he thought that mission boards had the authority to send people. They don't. Local churches have the authority to send people. So there's really no such thing then as a board missionary. Now, I know there might be people who are board missionaries, but they're not. And just because you use a mission board doesn't mean you're sent from it. And if you are sent from a board and you're not sent from your local church, you plain flat out are not a missionary. Okay? If he receives his authority from an agency other than the local church, it's not a missionary. Okay? We're not accountable to an agency, we're accountable to a church. Now, no missionary should go out from under a mission board. He's got to go out from his local church. So the question is not then, should you go out from your local church or a mission board? You must go out from your local church. All right. Now, I shouldn't have to teach this, but we're living in a climate where people don't understand the local church. And that's why I'm trying to give you the understanding that your authority comes from a local church, not from an agency, not from a group of men, not from a board of directors. It comes from the local church and God the Holy Spirit who sends you. Now, I'd say it is wrong to, it is not wrong to be sent from a local church. You must have a pastor that gives you assistance, accountability, authority. So I'm repeating myself over and over again. Why? I want to make sure we're clear about this. Many missionaries have what we would say, quote unquote, sending churches, but are really not even under their pastor's authority and the church's authority. And they get their direction and their guidance from the board. Where should they get their direction and guidance? From the local church. Should they be getting it from the board? No. Okay, it's not a guiding institution. God started churches with pastors, not board members. If you go back to Ephesians chapter 4:11, you say, you keep going back there. Yeah, because I like the Bible. It's a good place to, base things on. So you go back there, and it talks about, and he gave some apostles, prophets, evangelists, pastors, and teachers. Do you see board members and board directors in there? I don't think so. So we stick to local church. Board should not be the sending or sustaining agency. They only play a supportive role to a local church. Now, unfortunately, this is not always the case. So the role of of a proper board, a role of a proper board is to help the missionary and his local church. In fact, really, a true proper mission board should be. Now, I know some people would say there is no true proper mission board, so you shouldn't even have said that. But the role of a servicing agency is to support and help the local church. We'll talk more about this in a moment. The agenda of the board sometimes, though, seems to overshadow the goals of the missionary and his local church. Now, let me give you an example. I knew of a missionary who said he was called to go to a certain particular city in the country of Mexico. I'm called to this city, this country. Obviously, that's something he had prayed about. He felt God, the Holy Spirit leading him, his pastors, and all in agreement. He joined a mission board, and he was told that he could not go to that city by the mission board because there was another board missionary that needed his help somewhere else. And so the authority of the local church then was usurped and thwarted by some men who overruled God's plan to evangelize a particular city. I have a problem with that. Okay? And if you would say, that was a bad board. Yeah, but a lot of these boards, if you knew them, theoretically they'd say, oh yes, we are a local church mission board. We support the local church. And yet they do stuff like this. Okay? If I'm remembering correctly, this is one of the biggest of the independent Baptist mission boards that did this. And by the way, this this particular board, I just had it in my notes. Yes, it was one of the largest. Anyway, they boast about being a local church. God doesn't lead some board members to find God's will for the missionary. That's between God and the missionary and his home church. He leads those guys, not the guys in the stuffed shirts. Okay? So unfortunately, a lot of missionaries and the pastors, they succumb to the pressure of boards, because boards, they're the experts. They know better. They're helping us. So we'll just, well, you know better, so we'll let you do what needs to be done. What we need is some men who will find God's will and follow it, and regardless of what the experts out there say. Okay, let me move on. Any questions about that? I think it's pretty straightforward. Lawrence.
I'm just curious, why did mission agency societies or whatever start in the first place back whenever they did? Why did they think that the church couldn't do it?
That's a good question. A lot of those mission agencies many, many years ago, there was no real... some of those agencies, you have to remember, were formed by, they weren't a bunch of independent Baptists. They were formed by churches that were more Protestant, so they wouldn't have a problem with some kind of hierarchy form of anything. And so you got to remember, some of those guys were trying to stir people up for the cause of missions, and there was no mechanism out there to help. And so a bunch of pastors said, well, we'll form a society and we'll have our churches contribute to the society, and then we will help sponsor people. That's kind of how it started. Now, did a lot of good come from it? Yes. Do I think that was the ideal way of doing it? No. But the last time I checked, I was never quite a William Carey, Adoniram Judson, David Livingston, or any of those guys, Hudson Taylor, okay? So we could sit back and say, well, those guys, man, they weren't right. Yeah, but, God used them. And I could come back and say to some of you, are you guys right in everything that you do? And does God still use you? So it's only by the grace and mercy that God uses us anyway. So let's not get into a thing where we say, where we build, and this is a trap that a lot of independent Baptists fall into, not just independent, but a lot of people fall into, that we believe this, and this is more right than everybody else. So everybody else who doesn't believe what we know is the truth is a bunch of losers, and they're really not good, and they can do nothing for God. We have to be careful we don't fall into that. It's called pride. And you see a lot of independent Baptists get caught up in that. It's all about them, their particular doctrines, their everything. And we go right back to the big word, balance. Just be biblical. I don't know, did that answer your question? Okay, good. All right, let's continue then. So letter D would be mission boards provide good services. I'm just giving you just statements that I think are true. Okay, now you can make your own decisions about whether you want to use a mission board or not, but I'm just giving you statements. There are no mission boards in the Bible. Is that true or false? True. It's not wrong to go to the mission field without a board. Is that true or false? That's true. Okay. Missionaries are sent from a local church, not a mission board. Anybody have a problem with that? So that's true. And then letter D, mission boards provide good services. Whether you like mission boards or not, do they provide good services? Yes. Okay, so I'm just giving you I'm trying to give you a balanced approach here to mission boards. Now, mission boards are not in the Bible, but then again, neither are telephones. And we use them every day. And if we can use a telephone without compromising biblical principles, we know that's fine. So theoretically then, if a man could use a mission board and maintain sole dependence on his local church, for the authority of his local church, and not compromise his testimony, then can he use a mission board? If he can do that. Some say, no! I say, well, I think he probably could. Okay? Now, I make this statement with some reservations because there are a lot of boards who claim to be, support the local church. However, they violate the authority of the local church. So I have to say that I make some reservations when I say that, but you have to determine whether it's something you can do and it's the right agency that you're going from. Let me use another illustration. So when a pastor wants pews for his church, what does he do? Does he design the pew, calculate the load-bearing potential of the wood and the thickness, perform stress tests, and then figure out the appropriate angle for the back of the pew? Right? Because if you're sitting up too upright, it's not going to be very comfortable, right? And then some of the auditoriums, the floors, and so he calculates all that. He does all that himself, correct? Because he's a local church, and in the local church, man, I'm the pastor. I'm going to take care of it. No, he hires someone who has experience in that field. The pew company becomes a service, provides a service to the local church. That makes sense. Could a mission board provide a service that would help a local church just like a pew company helps a local church? I think that's possible. Okay? Now, there are some good services that a mission board provides that maybe some churches are not as as readily equipped to provide. Doesn't mean they can't, and doesn't mean they shouldn't try. It doesn't mean that the local church shouldn't or can't try to provide them. But here are some of the ways a mission board can help. Let me give you several of them. Number one, under the whatever that was, letter B, I think. Was it B or D? D. Number one, they can assist in dealing with foreign governments. Okay, there's usually a lot of paperwork involved in getting a missionary into the country. Visas, work permits, etc. Mission boards often have other people in the same country, and they can provide advice on some of these things. Of course, a missionary from his home church, and who doesn't use a board, could also contact someone who already has been there and get the same information without the use of a board. But the board may have had several missionaries in that country already, and they know some of the ins and outs and some of the roadblocks you're going to hit, and experience does offer a lot of help. Secondly, number two, they provide name recognition. Okay, what if you're a missionary going out from a very small church, and your small church, it's Podunkville Baptist Church from, Podunk, wherever, and you say, yeah, my name is, I was going to say, and I'm from Podunk Baptist Church, and it's like, okay, yeah, where's that? Yeah, and where's that? What city is that near? That's near, and they give another name of a city. Well, and where's that near? Well, that one's, and finally they figured out it's like, 500 miles from the nearest big city. It's like, really, I have no idea who you are, where you're from. I don't even know if there's a church out there. I don't even know if there is such a town. And no, we're not interested, okay? So, a guy from a small church may have trouble. I mean, in fact, if he's a small church, maybe his pastor, they've got a small circle of influence. His pastor doesn't know many pastors, and he calls up a few surrounding churches in the area, and that's about as far as he goes. He has nowhere else. He doesn't even know where else to go. So he gets on the internet. He's trying to find a bunch of different names of churches, and I don't know. They seem like they're Baptist, or whatever. At least they can provide some name recognition without knowing the stand of the missionary's home church. Again, they should try to find that out. I think if you're going to be taking on a missionary, you kind of want to know a little bit about that pastor in the home church, where they stand on some issues. But without knowing anything about this guy or where he's from, they might be leery to support him. And so the theory is that people know a board's reputation, and they know what the board stands for, and they know where that if they would, service this man, then he must be a halfway decent guy. They must have looked into him a little bit. Okay, so if the board has approved the missionary, and I say approved, but accepted him, then the pastors are more likely to have him in for a meeting. And really, they do provide some name recognition for some people. Then number 3, now again, whether you agree with using boards or not, I'm just trying to tell you some of the services, good services that they do provide. They may have a language school. They may not. Some boards do have language schools for the missionaries, to help focus on the language while attending a church run by one of the other, missionaries sent out from that same board. Number 4, they can assist in tax, not necessarily preparation, but advice. Okay, they can assist in tax advice. Getting in trouble with the IRS is not a really small matter. Okay, and many people don't know the pitfalls awaiting a missionary. And they've been around. They've had a lot of different missionaries, so they can provide some good advice. Okay, number 5, they handle monthly support. And that's probably one of the biggest reliefs of to a local church that a mission board can offer. They handle the missionaries' finances. They receive all the support, the monthly support that comes in from dozens and dozens of churches. They mail receipts to the churches and they forward the money to the missionary. And so it's a big task, and it can take a lot of work. If you have a couple of missionaries sent out from your church and you have to do the finances, well then you're going to have some extra secretarial power going on in your church. And it's going to take a lot more time. Number 6, they help with international banking. They help with international banking. Now, banking is vital to all missionaries. Why? Because they need money. They want money. They want to be able to get their money. And sometimes it's difficult to get money from a bank in the States to a bank in another country. There are some banks that do not provide international banking services because they don't have experience with it. Now, typically, mission boards, because they have a lot more customers, they can find a bank that will service and cooperate with international banks. And so the missionary can get better banking services. Number 7, they may have emergency funds available to lend for an immediate need. Okay. So maybe this mission board's got some money set aside in case one of their missionaries have some drastic emergency. They need to get out of the country. They need to have a flight to this. There's some huge problems. Well, that a small church may not have a large amount of cash available to wire to a foreign country in a time of crisis. They're just trying to have enough money to scrape up to pay the pastor that week. You know what I'm saying? And so they don't have a whole bunch of money sitting aside. So some boards have money set aside to assist their missionaries. They may have to pay it back or whatever, but at least there's a little thing there. When we were sent out from the church here, we had an emergency fund. Well, and we built that up, but at the same time, that emergency fund help build it up was in a mutual fund. So if I needed that money right away, I wasn't going to get it right away. I'd have to get it it might be a few days to get it out of my mutual fund, but at least I had it. So that's why, as a missionary, I made sure I had, don't tell Dave Ramsey, I had credit cards. So you could charge what you needed to charge and had a high enough limit to take care of what you needed to take care of, and then you could worry about paying that back once you pull it out of your emergency fund that's tied up somewhere else. Anyway, let's continue. Number 8, they take a load off of the local church. They do. Whether you are like mission boards or not, they do take a load off a local church. Some churches are not staffed sufficiently to provide for all the services, these services that we're discussing, without making a lot of great sacrifices. Well, you say, well, then they should be willing to make that great sacrifice. That's fine. If you believe that, that's okay. Just explain it to you. When a church does all of the work without the aid of a mission board, they could find that the load is bigger than they had ever imagined. And so they've got to count the costs and provide and be able to provide the necessary services that'll help that missionary and make sure he's not hindered on the board. So although boards provide some good services, in most cases I think that those a local church can provide the same services if they're willing to make the sacrifice. Okay? So some would argue that boards can provide the services more efficiently. Perhaps. Okay? And maybe not. Ultimately, that's a decision between the pastor and the missionary, the local church. Anyway, let's continue. Letter E. So those are some of the services the mission boards provide. Mission boards do provide some good services. Letter E. Recognize the drawbacks of using a mission board. So I gave you the pluses. Let me give you a couple of minuses. Okay? Number one, we've already said this, but it does need to be listed here. Boards can assume too much authority. Boards can assume too much authority. This is the number one downfall with many mission boards, okay? As governments have a way of taking too much power, so it is with mission boards. They may start out with good intentions, but a lot of times they falter. Number two, boards can hurt your testimony when they enter into compromise. It's kind of a two-edged sword. You know, a board can give you some name recognition and help you get maybe into churches that you may never have gotten into. But at the same time, it can also hurt you. A pastor comes in, he takes over from another pastor and he says, "Oh, look at all these guys from this board, this particular board. I don't like that board. I'm getting rid of them all." Say, that would never happen. Get out there and see. Oh yeah, it does happen. Guy comes in, says, "I don't like this mission board. We're dropping them all because they're all from that mission board. They must be just like that mission board, and they're compromisers. We're getting rid of them all." Okay. So another issue then facing these mission boards is compromise. Some boards do not take a stand on their written statement of faith and practice. Okay? I know of mission boards who have compromised in areas of holy living. Okay, they look the other way when it comes to dress standards. Pants and shorts on women are tolerated, and the Bible teaches modesty. They say, well, that's an issue between them and their local church. I'm just trying to say, so, and you are being serviced by the same mission board that services these people who don't have much standards. Now all of a sudden, some guy, some pastor, some church says, well, I know another family from that board and they don't have any standards, so you must not either. I'm just telling you, it is a double-edged sword. You live by the board, you can die by the board. Another board allows missionaries to drink wine with their meals because it's socially acceptable in some countries. This is supposed to be an independent Baptist mission board. You have a problem with that? I have a problem with that. I don't want to be part of that. Okay? How foolish, how ignorant of biblical teaching. Okay? Music standards of many board missionaries can be weak and sometimes non-existent. Consequently, the missionaries adopt the worldly music in their churches on the mission field. That rock beat associated with dancing, it becomes tolerable. Why? Because it's culture, it's part of their culture. Now, you may see some presentations from some African missionaries, and you'll see, the women up there, just jiving, just getting down, and you might hear a little bit of the music, and it's, it's all that. You say, well, that's just their culture, that's just their music. Well, I was in that culture too in Africa, but we didn't have that in our church. Because it's not a cultural issue, it's a biblical issue. The world's music is the world's music. It doesn't matter what country you're in. Okay, so again, some guy has some guy from another country in Africa in from this certain place, from this certain mission board, and he's got the jivey music, and then you're calling up and saying, hey, I'm coming, what board are you with? I'm with such and such. Okay, I don't think we can have it. We're kind of full up for the next 25 years. And he's not going to tell you why. It's just, that's what's going to happen. So, to identify with a particular board that tolerates a lot of compromise can damage your testimony. And I think that should be something you consider. So as much as the board is checking you out to see if they want to service you so you don't damage their testimony, you're checking them out so they don't damage your testimony. Anyway, number 3, boards may jeopardize your support. Okay, understandably, a growing practice among pastors is to drop all missionaries associated with boards that allow compromise. So then they begin going off balance and saying they all are compromising and they're all usurping the authority of the local church. So we're dropping all missionaries with every board. Anyway, that can happen. So while it's true that association with the board may help you gain support more quickly, it can also prove that you can lose it pretty quickly too. That's why, let me just say this. When you're trying to go onto the mission field, you start by contacting the churches that you know and that you know are good and solid, and you try whatever you can, the best you can, to have good, solid churches supporting you, because you want to work in a partnership, okay? There are going to be some churches you don't know much about, but when I had a list that I made up from people I knew from just contact with our church, and then when I exhausted that possibility, I'd ask another missionary, hey, give me a list of your best churches, not the best supporting, not the ones with the most money, not the ones that give you the most of everything. Give me a list of your best churches. Because why? I want them praying for me. I don't want just their money. I want them praying for me. I want to know that we're working together and that we can help represent them on the field. And so you really don't have to worry too much about that if you're just focusing on some good churches in the first place. I'm just trying to give you some, that there can be some drawbacks from using a board. All right? And of course, that board can also jeopardize you just because you have a board. And you make that call and say, no, we only support local church missionaries. Well, I am a local church missionary. Nope, you have a board. Well, I'm not sent from the board. I'm sent from my church. Nope, you have a board. All they do is take care of my money. Nope, you have a board. Okay, thanks, bye. So I'm just saying, having a board can jeopardize your support, not just because of their testimony, but because of the fact that they are a board, and some guys just don't like it. And there's an increasingly more. In fact, I would say maybe 10, 15 years ago, it was kind of like the new thing, Not the new thing, but it was like an uprising of certain churches. We're only going to support, those without a board. I know there's still people out there like that. And anyway, let's continue. Letter F. Develop guidelines for selecting a board or service agency. Develop guidelines for selecting a board or service agency. Now, I have to be honest with you. And many, many years ago, I was just, because I saw some of the, some boards usurping authority over other missionaries. And many, many years ago, I was just dead set again, all boards. I didn't even like any boards. Like, well, whatever, that was just kind of not the balanced approach, okay? And I had to really step back and take a look at it and say, okay, well, I'm just trying to go through things with you. Ultimately, as we'll say in the notes a little bit later, it's going to be between you and your sending church. Now, you can say, I'm I'm called of God to go to Mexico City. And your pastor says, well, then you're going to go to and use this board. No. I don't believe in boards. Are you called of God to go out from our church? Yes. Are you called to go to Mexico City? Yes. Then you're going to go through that board. No. Well, then guess what? You're not going to the mission field. Because your pastor and your church are guiding you one way and you don't want to do it. So guess what? You're not going to represent them. So you're going to have to make a decision. Anyway, let's take a quick little break. We'll come back and give you some points under letter F. Okay, we are continuing with the notes here. Letter F. I suggest letter F. If you're going to use a board, letter F, develop guidelines for selecting a board or servants agency. Here's a few guidelines that might be of some help to you. Number 1, always have a sending church with a pastor you are under. Okay? Well, okay, what happens if the church is without a pastor in between? Okay, so make sure you're sent from a local church. Okay? That's what I'm trying to say. Number 1, always have a sending church whose authority you are under. Now, be sure that your pastor approves of your decision to use a board and which board to use if you're going to do that. Okay? So be sure your pastor approves of your decision to use a board and which board you plan to use. Now again, there's a lot of churches, there's a lot of small churches. Some of you might come from a small church and your church has never sent out a missionary in your lifetime. Maybe it did 20 years ago. But in your lifetime, there's currently no missionary sent out from your local church. And the pastor might really not have a lot of experience in knowing what to do with that. Okay, so you're ready to go to the mission field. Great. We're sending you out. Yes. And what do we do? I don't know. Okay, so let's do it. All right. So just make sure you work together. Okay, number 2. Determine if your home church is willing or able to be a clearinghouse for you. When I say a clearinghouse, to be able to receive your money, all those checks that come in from those supporting churches, whether they're able to process those and deposit them in a bank for you and wire the money into your account over there. Some people just use debit cards, but then they have a fee from using their debit card every time they take out money. And do you really want to go and anyway, debit cards is another funny thing. So some places there's only a limit. You might need a lot of cash and you can only get a little bit out each time. So you got to go. And then in some countries, you're getting out like wads of cash. I mean, all I wanted was $100 and you got this much stack of bills, okay? Now, whew. I'm telling you, when Zambia rebased the kwacha, it really helped a lot. But it used to be the highest denomination at one point was like a $2 bill. I mean, so if you wanted to go buy something and it was, you're going to go buy a car and they wanted cash and you're going with it a few $1,000s, you're going with a bag of, literally you're going with a bag of money. Or you bring some US dollars. Okay, US dollars are gold in a sense over there, anywhere. So determine if your home church is willing or able to be a clearinghouse for you. Small churches may not be able to pay those bills for you. Well, that's another thing too. Now, thankfully, there's a thing called online banking now. But a lot of times, you might be using your credit card overseas, and then all of a sudden, the bill comes in. Well, if you're not there to pay it, what's going to happen? All right? You may have some medical bills that are posted, and then they're sent back to your home address. Well, it'd be kind of nice to have someone pay those bills for you so you don't get sent to a collection agency and find yourself in jail when you return from the no, maybe not that, but you know what I'm saying. All right, and you might want someone to help keep track of your support, mail out your missionary letters, all that. All of that takes manpower, and a lot of small churches may not have that. And it can be a big drain on even big churches like ours. Okay, number 3, choose a board. If you're going to take a board, if you're going to go with a board, choose a board that is under the authority of a local church. Now, I believe this is important. Now, I think, let me just say this. A board that is not under the leadership of a pastor is not under biblical leadership. That's what I believe. Now, and if you want to argue and say, well, it's just like the Pew Company, then fine, you can say it's just like the Pew Company. So it's fine. Okay. But I think a local church, I think a mission board that is trying to do a ministry, it is a ministry, it's trying to service other people in the ministry, I think it's good that is under a local church. And ministries without biblical leadership very often run into compromise because their foundation, no matter how strong, no matter how sincere, I don't think is on as solid ground as it would be if it was a ministry under the local church. There's no substitute for pastoral leadership. Okay, God gives pastors for a reason, and all ministries should be run, I believe, out of a New Testament local church where the ministry is under the direction of pastoral authority. Okay? Promises that are given to the local church, promises that are given to pastors are for pastors, not for board members or organizations. I know a lot of people say, yeah, but all of the people on our board are pastors. Yeah, but all of those pastors don't agree on everything, and so there has to be a little bit of a someone has to have the final say. And if you're out from a local, if that board is under a local church, then guess who has the final say? It better be that pastor. Okay. Again, people say, but what about some of the great missionaries of the past who didn't necessarily go out of a local church? They did go out of a local church. Okay. It may be that they allowed the board to control them a little bit too much. Some of those, ones that I mentioned earlier, the famous ones, yes, maybe they did. But God still blessed His Word, and He likes to bless His Word. And we can rejoice that God used them. Let's continue. Number 4, never choose a board that will control you or your ministry. Never choose a board that will control you or your ministry. Now, some board's authority supersedes your pastor's. In that case, you don't choose them. And if it happens, then you might want to find a new board. Okay? You're under a local church, not a board. It's authority. Now, again, I understand if you go with a board, they might have some guidelines that they expect you to follow. If it's in harmony with what you believe and what your church believes, that's fine. I understand that. Okay, some boards tell you where you can go, who you can go to be with, how long you can stay, who you must work with, all of that. I think that's wrong. And some will take you off the field and say, well, we need you to be a regional director. Well, what happened to directing the churches that I was with? Well, no, we need you over here. Well, I don't think the board has that authority, nor should they do that. All right, so that was letter F, develop guidelines. Let's look at letter G. Look for alternatives. Okay, look for alternatives. Okay, you might say, boy, I look at all those things that a mission board can do, but I really have a hard time going out from a mission board. And my home church can't take care of all the support checks that come in. So what do I do? No, I do. I'm gonna look for an alternative, okay? God's people should always look for ways to perform God's work more efficiently and without compromise. So if your church is not able or it's unwilling to give you the help that you need, and boards seem like a compromise to you, there are other options out there. One of those would be just basically a service agency, okay? I know they would call themselves a clearinghouse. I know of some missionaries who use a clearinghouse in Texas. They're not a mission board. They're very clear to say they're not a mission board. But what they do is they take your money, they process it, they don't charge anything. That's the other thing that there's a big problem. There's a big problem with some mission boards is they like to charge you a certain amount to use their mission board every month. And then pastors get upset about that. Well, why am I giving you some support to pay this board? And some of the boards charge a lot of money. And yeah, it goes round and round and round. Someone will say, well, what's the difference then if you're going to use the clearinghouse? And all they do is take your money. And all they do is process your money and do this, and then they put it into your account. And what's the difference between that and the mission board? Some people would say, absolutely nothing. And some people say, well, that's just semantics. It's for you to decide, okay? I'm just trying to tell you there are alternatives. If you can't, your church can't do it, and you and your church have a problem with mission boards, then get a clearinghouse who processes your money for you, okay? Or you can ask your Aunt Sally to do it for you, and then hope she doesn't die while you're in the mission field and you have no access to your money, okay? So, anyway, the clearinghouse. The options are anyway. Letter J. No, sorry, where are we? H. Whether or not to use a mission board is solely the decision of the missionary and his local church. It's solely the decision of the missionary and his local church. You weigh the pros and cons, investigate the boards, pray about it, make a decision, and go for it. Okay? There's no commands in the Bible to use a board. There's no commands in the Bible to abstain from a board. What's clear from the Bible is the authority comes from where? Local church. I've said it now 128 times in the last couple of classes. Maybe not exactly. But I'm trying to drive that into your head. If you leave this class with nothing else, you will say, local church, local church. Missionary goes out from a local church. Why? Because it's so important. It is foundational. This is the philosophy you've got to have. Okay? And by all means, if a board uses or abuses its authority and starts to compromise, then stop using the board, okay? Just stay true to biblical leadership. Then, the last point would be letter I, guard against pride. We should all show understanding toward missionaries and pastors who are trying to do their best to serve God in an imperfect world. There are good men on both sides of the issue. And don't exalt yourself as superior for your position. Now, I do get uptight, and you say, well, you're doing the very same thing you're saying not to do. I do get uptight when people punish guys for following a biblical model. Okay? He doesn't have a mission board, and so he's not going to be supported because he's just doing what everyone in the Bible did. I think there's a problem with that. Okay? But you want to guard against pride, and there's good people on both sides of the issue. And learn in the ministry which battles are worth fighting. Okay? There are some things that's just not worth fighting. And you isolate yourself from other good people in the ministry, and soon you are an island. Okay? You exist only all by yourself. You have no friends. And it's fine with you because you think that everyone else is a bunch of compromisers. So you don't want them as friends anyway. And what a lonely, horrible, miserable way to live. And you don't want to end up that way in the ministry. Okay? Don't be critical of everybody else. All right? Just try to serve God. Try to get along. Love one another, right? All right. Any questions on this point of mission boards? I don't don't say I have all the answers to everything. I'm just trying to give you some guidelines, trying to give you a balanced view of this. I come down and say, there's a bunch of times boards do the wrong thing. Be very, very careful. And I also come back and say, they do offer some pretty good services. And, you know, the guys sent out from our church use one particular board that they actually don't call themselves a board. Everyone else calls them a board. They call themselves a service agency. And that's fine. I don't care what you call them. Okay? Through the history of our relationship with them, they've always sided with our pastor in the local church. And so they have bent over backwards to make sure they do not usurp authority over the local church in any way. So I think that's pretty good. And that's why our church is able to send some of the guys down there to use it.